It was on one of those forgotten roads, winding and taken over by fields of dry earth and gnarled trees, that the intercity bus traveled. The old blue and white machine, with its rusted body and the heavy roar of its engine, had been a constant for decades. Its route was the same, night after night, rain or shine, from the small, isolated municipality of Santa Elvira to the larger city, almost 4 hours away. The journey was monotonous, a sacred routine for the few passengers who depended on the route. They were tired-faced workers, students who split their time between academic life and homesickness, and old people clinging to market bags. On that particular night, the atmosphere was heavier than usual. A strange quiet hung in the air. The sky was covered by thick, dark clouds, moonless, and the road seemed even more deserted than normal, its edges swallowed by absolute blackness. The clock on the dashboard, a solitary light in the darkness, read 11:45 p.m. when the driver, a calloused man of few words named Arnaldo, cleared his throat and said in a low voice, more to himself than to the others, "Not long now." The few passengers, no more than 7 that night, were either asleep or looking at their cell phones, indifferent to the morning. Only one woman in the last row seemed to be paying attention to the road. Mariana, a young teacher who had recently moved to the region, watched the dark fields through the window. She felt a strange unease in her chest, a feeling she couldn't ignore. The landscape looked like an endless painting with no point of reference. The bus, the only point of light, seemed to float in nothingness. Arnaldo slowed down. On every trip, when he reached that specific point on the road, his body reacted with involuntary tension. And he wasn't alone. The older passengers already knew that at the stroke of midnight, the bus would stop, always in the same place. It was an unwritten rule, a macabre ritual that was part of the journey. And exactly at 12 a.m., it happened. Without anyone asking, without there being an official stop, the bus screeched to a halt in front of a side dirt road almost swallowed by tall weeds and darkness. There were no lamp posts, houses, or any sign of life, just absolute blackness. The silence that followed the stop was so deep that one could hear the cold wind outside. The doors opened with a metallic hiss, a sound that abruptly broke the quiet. Mariana flinched, confused. Why had they stopped? And why did all the other passengers seem so tense, so scared? An elderly man with a market bag in his hand looked at the window and closed his eyes tightly, mumbling a prayer. And from within the darkness, the passenger appeared. He was tall, too thin, in an old jacket that seemed worn by time and an endless sadness. He wore a dark hat that partially hid his face, but not enough for Mariana to miss his skin, which was too pale, almost gray. His steps made no sound at all as they touched the asphalt. He seemed to glide, not walk. Without looking at anyone, he got on the bus and sat down in the same seat he always did, the second-to-last seat on the left by the window. The passengers avoided looking. Some closed their eyes, pretending to be asleep. Others simply shrugged and looked away, as if the man's mere presence was an affront. Only Mariana, not understanding the strange atmosphere, watched him. There was something abnormal about this man. It wasn't just his pale skin or old clothes. It was an oppressive silence around him, as if even the engine's roar had diminished. The air around him seemed colder. As soon as he sat down, a cold wind swept through the interior of the vehicle, making Mariana's breath condense in the air. She felt an uncontrollable shiver run down her spine. "Who is he?" Mariana whispered, leaning toward the passenger next to her. an elderly woman with gray hair who clutched a crocheted bag tightly. The woman stared at her with wide eyes. "Don't ask."
The bus continued its journey, but from that moment on, something changed. The trip became an ordeal. The cold was unbearable. The passengers' breath condensed in the air, as if they were inside a freezer. The silence was so dense that Mariana could hear her own heart pounding in her chest. Outside, the road seemed to repeat itself. The same bushes, the same trees, the same rocks, as if the bus were trapped in a cycle. It was then that Mariana looked at the window and noticed something impossible. In the reflection, where she should only see the pale passenger in the hat, there was more. Several faces, pale and distorted, pressed against the glass as if they had been crushed. Mouths open in silent screams, lifeless eyes. The images lasted only an instant, but they were enough to make her shudder and retreat against the seat, out of breath. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, trying to convince herself that the vision was just a result of her imagination. When she opened them again, the man was watching her, not in the reflection, but directly. His eyes were dark, as deep as chasms, and seemed to suck any courage left in her. That look was not of hatred or malice. It was of an infinite sadness, a melancholy that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 years. Mariana turned her face, trying to calm down. It was then that the driver murmured, almost to himself, "Always the same place, always the same time. The road never ends after he gets on." The teacher leaned forward, ignoring her fear. "Who is he? Why does he do this to us?" Arnaldo didn't answer immediately. He just looked in the rearview mirror, making sure the passenger remained motionless, an imposing shadow in the seat. Then he spoke in a low tone. "This man has been getting on this bus for over 30 years, always here, always at midnight. No one has ever dared to deny the stop. The road is never the same after that." The bus continued on the endless road. The clock on the dashboard now read 1:10 a.m. Something didn't make sense. At that hour they should already be close to the city, but they continued in the middle of nowhere, as if the journey would never end. The air was colder, and the passengers who had previously seemed oblivious now trembled. Suddenly, a metallic sound echoed inside the bus. It was as if something had hit the bodywork. All the passengers flinched. The noise repeated, louder, as if claws were scratching the vehicle from the outside, a desperate attempt to get in. Mariana tried to look out the window, but everything was black. Only shadows moved between the trees, tall, slender figures, just like the passenger. Then she heard voices, whispers coming from all sides, calling her name. "Mariana! Mariana!" She recoiled, out of breath. "Did you hear that?" she asked the others. But no one answered. Everyone seemed paralyzed, their eyes fixed forward, like puppets. It was then that she realized the midnight passenger was no longer in his seat. Her heart pounded. She looked back, forward, down the aisles. Empty. The seat where he had been was now completely dry, with no sign of his presence, but the cold was increasing. The voice of the old woman beside her echoed in her mind. "Don't ask. Never ask." But it was too late. The silence of the other passengers was not fear. It was resignation. They already knew. Suddenly, an icy hand touched her shoulder. The skin cold as marble, caused a sharp scream to escape from her throat. Mariana screamed, turning around. The passenger was there, standing beside her, so close she could feel his icy breath on her skin. He was not made of flesh and bone, but of shadows, of an ancient melancholy. His eyes, as deep as black holes, reflected only nothingness. He leaned in and whispered, with a voice that was not a voice, but an echo, "You already have your destiny." He was the conductor. The route was his purgatory, and the passengers the souls he transported. He was the death that traveled on the midnight road, and the bus, the vehicle that led to a place of no return. The man was not a legend. He was a living lament.
And in the blink of an eye, he disappeared. The bus braked abruptly. Mariana fell against the seat in front of her. The driver was sweating, pale. He looked in the rearview mirror and with a choked voice murmured, "We've arrived," opening the doors. Outside, it was not the city. There were no lit streets, no houses, no signs of life. Just an immense cemetery, taken over by the fog, its gravestones looking like rotten teeth in the darkness. The silence of the place was as deep as the one on the bus. The passengers stood up in silence, their faces resigned and emotionless, and began to get off, one by one, as if obeying an invisible command. They were ghosts returning home. The old man, the student, the worker, they all walked towards the gravestones. Mariana tried to stop, but her legs moved on their own. She felt pulled by an irresistible force, as if invisible ropes were leading her. She was the new passenger, the newest soul. When she realized, she was already among the gravestones, the cold cutting into her bones. When she looked back, the bus was no longer there, just darkness. And among the shadows, the midnight passenger was watching her. His hat cast an impossible shadow, covering the entire cemetery, as if the night belonged to him. Before she could scream, Mariana heard hundreds of voices at the same time, whispering in unison, coming from all directions, from the trees, from the gravestones, from the fog. "Welcome." And the darkness, with the sound of a sigh, swallowed her forever. The midnight passenger departed, leaving a new soul for his collection, so that the road would never be the same again.